Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Pattison, and I'm part of the GradFlix team in the School of Graduate Studies at McMaster University. Welcome to our inaugural GradFlix Final Showcase. You're probably wondering what a GradFlix is. Each competitor has produced a 1-minute film to tell us what their research is about. This was a great opportunity for grad researchers to use their creativity and technical skill to share their research story. And today, we will be enjoying the worldwide premiere screenings of our top finalists. Before I introduce our first speaker, it's important to recognize and acknowledge that although we are not together on campus at this time, students, staff, and faculty at McMaster meet, learn, and work on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Now, I would like to introduce you to our Vice Provost and Dean of Graduate Studies, Dr. Doug Welch.
Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here this afternoon after a year of so many challenges to celebrate graduate students who have found new and interesting ways to communicate their work. McMaster is one of the top research universities in the world, and our graduate student community is an important part of that enterprise. It is no surprise that we have so many excellent GradFlix videos submitted in this inaugural year of our competition. This past year has been challenging for our students. They've had to find new ways to manage their day-to-day tasks. They've had to don layers of personal protective equipment to do a quick check in the lab. They've had to learn new technologies so they can connect with their supervisor and their research teams and/or teach a class. They've set up home offices so they can continue their research in a virtual environment. But from these challenges, we have learned so many new ways to communicate, and as researchers, we should not underestimate the importance of effective communication to tell our research stories. So we thought, let's launch a new communication competition, just to add a bit of pizzazz to 2021. Enter GradFlix, originally conceived at the University of Waterloo. In a world where we spend so much time looking at a monitor that screen fatigue has become an actual thing, sharing your message in a brief but effective manner is increasingly important. And GradFlix provides just that opportunity. It's also giving you a chance to flex your creative muscles, whether you're crafting your script, showcasing an original piece of music, playing a part on screen, singing a song, reciting a poem, using your artistic composition skills, or writing and reciting a literary interpretation of your research. This year, the sky's the limit. It also gives you a chance to use all those technical skills you learned over the past year and apply them to your video making. So I'm happy to welcome all of you to our virtual GradFlix Final Showcase. And I hope in the not too distant future, we will be greeting each other in a celebration of these GradFlix videos or next year's creation of our GradFlix series. Well done, and thank you for hanging in there with us.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. And now let's go through our GradFlix 101. First, who is eligible? GradFlix is open to grad students registered in a PhD or an MRP or thesis-based master's program. What does a GradFlix look like? Each video must focus on the participant's current grad research and must be no longer than 60 seconds. Each submission must be their original work, only one submission allowed per competitor, and as always, the decision of the judges is final. Finally, how is GradFlix judged? Adjudication is broken down to 3 key areas. Communication is weighted at 50%. Essentially, this is the ability to explain complex ideas in an accessible way and to a broad audience. Creativity and visual impact are weighted at 30%. And finally, the technical quality is weighted at 20%. This will include whether you have used images, animations, sound. And now let's go on to our judges. For our preliminary round, we had 5 judges from across the university who gave their time to help us through the first stage of adjudication. Thanks to Jill Egziza, Director of Faculty Leadership and Development in the Office of the Provost, Lori Dillon, Manager of Research Communications in the Office of VP Research, Nee Jaden, Senior Project Manager and International Liaison Officer in the Office of International Affairs, Leanne Romaine, Graduate Studies Librarian in the University Library, and Sonia Verma, Manager of Strategic Communications in University Advancement. For adjudication of our GradFlix final, we would like to thank our judges from McMaster and the broader community. Thanks to Peter Diakowski, CEO at Scholars Education Center and former left guard for the Hamilton Tiger Cats Football Club. Annette Hom, who is co-host of CHCH Morning Live and involved with many Hamilton community organizations. Vivian Lewis, University Librarian for McMaster University. Caitlin Knott, Inclusion and Anti-Racism Educator in the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And Giancarlo DeRay, President of McMaster's Student Union. At the end of our showcase, we will be announcing our top 3 GradFlix winners who will receive cash prizes ranging from $1,000 for first to $250 for third prize. As well, these winners will receive the Dean's Award for Excellence in Communicating Graduate Research in the fall. We will launch a poll at the end of today's showcase, and our viewers will have an opportunity to vote for the People's Choice Award. Now it's time to begin our GradFlix final showcase. Our first submission is from Nicholas Simard in the Faculty of Engineering.
Concussion. Many of us have had one before, and you're about to see one now. Incoming! But what if I told you a routine MRI of this brain shows up as healthy? Only severe brain trauma is visible with today's techniques, but more than 80% of concussions would go undetected. My name is Nick Simard, and our research makes concussions visible. Using advanced MRI techniques, we dive deeper into the imaging data, investigating the microstructural integrity of the brain. Using intensive statistics, we classify brain regions on a severity scale, where mild injuries are orange and severe ones are red. This delivers game-changing information on the presence, severity, and location of injury, finally providing patients and clinicians clarity on concussions. Thank you.
Next, we have Megan Verhout from the Faculty of Health Sciences.
Imagine your lungs are like an elastic band. They stretch and recoil as you breathe in and out. Now, imagine your lungs are stiff, like a thick elastic band you just can't stretch. If you live with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF, this may be your reality. I'm Megan Verhout. My research explores possible causes for IPF. I study a blood cell called the monocyte, which, we believe, enters and leads to thickening of the lung tissue. I compare monocytes from IPF patients to monocytes from healthy people and aim to uncover differences in their properties. My hope is that someday, when we better understand these monocyte cells, we can cure IPF, this terrible disease that robs us of something so simple as breathing.
Next is Praderni Prabhagaran from the Faculty of Health Sciences.
Acute myeloid leukemia is a cancer of the blood and bone marrow. Patients over 60 years old make up 75% of all cases, yet their 5-year survival rate is only 3 to 8%. This is because current treatment options such as intensive chemotherapy or bone marrow transplants are too toxic for older patients. Fortunately, a new regimen combining venetoclax and Vidaza has shown to induce remission in 60% of older patients. However, in the bone marrow, AML cells can reprogram neighboring cells to support the cancer, causing resistance to the co-treatment. My project focuses on how these neighboring cells support AML cells by looking at changes in growth, survival, differentiation, and energy production when treated with and without venetoclax and Vidaza. We hope to find ways to overcome this co-treatment resistance in order to improve the survival rate and quality of life for older patients.
Our next GradFlix is from Bruno Ferrara in the Faculty of Engineering.
The perception reaction time of an average person is around 2 seconds. This is enough time for two approaching vehicles to get more than 100 meters closer before the drivers hit the brakes, which can be too late to react. In my research, I work in collaboration with industry to develop LiDAR systems for autonomous vehicles. LiDAR is an imaging technique similar to ultrasound that uses lasers to scan the environment and provide information to a self-driving car. It analyzes everything in a radius of hundreds of meters and almost instantly feeds the car with information about its surroundings. Our devices are based on integrated photonics, which means we have the potential to package them on a chip about the size of a coin. 2 seconds don't sound like much, but it's just enough to save lives.
Next is Billy Bostad from the Faculty of Science.
Fitting exercise into your day can be tough, but that's okay. I'm here to help. I study efficient ways to make the heart stronger with exercise. How efficient are we talking here? Performing just 3 hard sprints, lasting only 20 seconds each with a 2-minute break in between, was enough to improve heart function after 12 weeks of training. How can exercise lasting just 20 seconds make the heart stronger? When you perform hard exercise, your heart rate increases. When you stop exercising, your heart continues to beat rapidly for multiple minutes. This triggers it to adapt and become stronger, even though you've only exercised for 20 seconds. How can I implement this into my day? Get creative. Sprint up that hill when biking to school. Take the stairs. These are known as exercise snacks, and you can use them to snack your way to a healthier heart.
Next, we have Kelvin Zoo from the Faculty of Engineering.
How can we provide medical imaging support all over the world? Well, what if I said the solution is the same as training duck identifying experts? Hear me out. We send people to duck school, where they see examples and counterexamples of ducks. After some training time, they will learn how to properly identify ducks. AI research has seen huge growth recently, so why don't we train computers this way instead? We can send computer programs all over to provide expertise in emergencies and remote locations. Well, we can, kind of. Let's imagine instead of training people, we train computers. Instead of ducks, it's ultrasound images, but ultrasound images can look different depending on who took the picture and, well, how they did it. So how can we trust that it's learning the right things? That's what I'm working on. By examining and quantifying how these images vary, we can better train AI models to act as duck experts, medical imaging support, all around the world.
We've now seen half of our GradFlix submissions, and I've got to say, these are really great. GradFlix is a wonderful way to build on your communication skills. We had a quick chat with McMaster's own Wade Hemsworth, a media relations manager in university advancement, about the importance for grad researchers to hone their communication skills.
Communicating your research is a skill. How important is it for graduate researchers to build their communication and presentation skills?
I think that it's very important to be able to communicate clearly about one's research to a variety of audiences, starting early on in one's career and continuing through. And it's a skill that only becomes more important as one progresses. There are many audiences that need to understand what it is that researchers do. They are not necessarily people in the same field. And so translating that research into something that is not only comprehensible to the public, but is compelling, interesting to the public is critical. One might be speaking to people who are responsible for giving grants or for providing other forms of resources. One might be speaking to potential donors or future colleagues One might be speaking to the media. And in those cases, that information can be seen by everyone. And we have to make sure that it's as useful and interesting and easy to understand as we can make it.
Awesome, that's great. What do you recommend graduate students do to help build their skills? Obviously, GradFlix is an example of that, but some other stuff too.
Well, I guess it's one thing that graduate students can do. This is kind of a funny way of answering that question, but I hope it will be helpful. One is really to pay attention to how other people, not only in your own field, but in different fields, are communicating their research. And think about what managed to bubble up to the top and get on the news. Why did that happen? How good of a job is that person doing? Do you understand and do you care about what that person is saying as they're speaking? Do you come away feeling like you want to know more? Do you feel like you've been informed? So to pay attention to how other people are succeeding or even how they're failing at it, to look at things critically and see yourself in that position is important. Another thing is to remember that the major skill is to be able to share your story without it becoming too clouded with technical terminology and to be too sort of far into the weeds of what you do in the sense, in the context of how another person outside your field might understand it. Now, there's a voice that one needs to use when communicating within the field, writing in a journal, talking to colleagues who know everything about what you're doing. And then there's another voice that we need to use for people who don't know anything about it. And really an interesting thing that I think demystifies and makes this seem easier to do is the voice that you need for that is the same voice that everyone probably is already using to explain what they do at home, to their families, to their friends, to people outside the field. We often coach people to say, to use the same voice they might use if they were sitting on the bus beside somebody who said, "What do you do for a living?" That's where we need to get to. And it's a skill to be able to do that without being too mysterious or too confounding to another person, and also without removing too much substance, to make sure that we're not dumbing it down and making a cartoon of what we're doing. To find the balance is a skill, but it's a skill that is probably easier to develop than I think most people might think.
That's some really good advice for our students. That's great. So we have one more question for you. And as someone who helps researchers present their work to the media, do you have any tips or advice that would translate to presenting at a conference or participating in something like GradFlix or SSHRC's Storytellers?
Well, I guess what I would advise is that what you do as a researcher is gather evidence and reach conclusions or test theories and hypotheses and then show how they're proven or disproven. That's not necessarily telling a story. So what we need to do is to find within that information a narrative story that other people will be interested in. There's a reason why everyone chooses the field they do, because it's super interesting to them. That passion needs to come through, as well as there needs to be a narrative thread, a story. Usually a good tool to use is to think to yourself how what you're doing applies to the lives of everyday people. Why does this matter to a person who is not in my field, who's just out there and could be impacted by this research in some way? And that is a good way, a good door in, because you're at that doorway as the researcher, and so is the other person. And you're saying, come on in and let me show you around. But if you think of a way to open that is going to draw the person in, especially, I guess an important thing to remember is that the world is full of distractions. Everything is a potential distraction from someone consuming or paying attention to what you're doing. That might be something else they might want to read or listen to. It might be something that's happening on their phone or on their computer screen. And what you want to do is to be able to say, come here, pay attention to this, in a way that is friendly and inviting and helps them to get from the beginning to the end of your message in a way that they're going to enjoy, and it's going to leave your information in their heads at the end.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for your time today, Wade, and for talking to our grad students.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
We begin the second half of today's GradFlix with Erika Dao from the Faculty of Science.
Figuring out the exact size of a cancerous tumor is a tough task. With imaging technology, we have a pretty good idea of the size of the tumor, but it could change by the time a patient is lying on the operating table. Surgeons will try their best, but there's a risk they won't get all of the cancer. How can we help them know exactly how much tissue to remove? My name is Erika Dao, and I'm developing a tool to detect the margins surrounding breast tumors during surgery. Breast tissue contains structural and metabolic compounds. If we shine light on the tissue, these compounds reflect and emit light of a certain intensity, wavelength, and lifetime. When we measure these properties, we look for trends that can be used to develop an algorithm that can tell if an unknown sample is cancerous or non-cancerous. This handheld device will give surgeons the peace of mind of knowing that their patients are completely cancer-free.
Next is Nicole Rakowski from the DeGroote School of Business and the Faculty of Health Sciences.
In Canada, of the almost 2.5 million annual hospital admissions, 185,000 are classified as adverse events and 70,000 are preventable. In order to identify system improvement opportunities, effective management strategies are crucial. To date, very little research has explored which management techniques are most effective in improving the patient experience. My research aims to bridge the disconnect between healthcare management and the behavioral science that motivates employees to provide better care, so that during times of tragedy, they offer a sense of hope to those that have lost it. Critiquing and highlighting the most significant contributions made in the field of management and patient experience will be the initial methodology. My goal is to design a system and conceptual model of techniques that can be used by healthcare leaders globally, so that at the end of the day, patients like Abby can leave with a smile.
Next up is Emily Wood from the Faculty of Science.
Isn't it amazing how musicians play together, all at the same time, all without a single word? Next time, look closely. They communicate with movements, body sway movements. In McMaster's Live Lab, we study the body sway of groups with motion capture. We create 3D models of musicians while they play, and mathematical modeling reveals how they influence each other. We basically measure nonverbal communication through body sway. I aim to answer questions like, how do ensembles use body sway to learn unfamiliar music together? And how do body sway interactions develop in children? My goal is to understand how musicians communicate to coordinate to create the music we love.
Next is Rachael Finnerty from the Faculty of Science.
Engaging undergraduate university students in proactive mental health is critical. Negative stigma can be a barrier to reaching out for help, resulting in reactive care opposed to proactive care. What about music therapy for proactive wellness? Our goal is to provide evidence for the efficacy of online group music therapy to proactively manage stress and anxiety. Youth already participate in music on a regular basis, and there's no negative stigma associated with music. We are collecting psychological data, the biomarker data of cortisol through hair samples, and physiological data to measure changes in stress and anxiety. Let's bring proactive wellness to campus.
Next is Brianna Owusu from the Faculty of Health Sciences.
Your 6th grade classroom reads The Outsiders out loud. If you're like Caleb here, you've already matched the number of people ahead of you to the paragraph you'll read. Except Caleb has dyslexia, a learning disability that makes reading challenging. He knows that whatever paragraph he lands on, he won't remember the words anyway. His brain area that stores words in memory is poorly activated, but the power of music can help Caleb remember. Listening to music boosts memory and increases literacy skills in children. Their brain rhythms synchronize to the rhythms of the music, preparing them to predict and read likely words at expected points in time. My research compares rhythmic music to non-rhythmic music, exploring its ability to strengthen memories for new words, helping children like Caleb boost their vocabulary.
And our final GradFlix for 2021 is from Leah Gordon in the Faculty of Social Sciences.
Mental health has become a crisis on Canadian university campuses. Post-secondary students are struggling to receive accessible, timely, and affordable mental health care. So just how are they being cared for? Many students turn to self-care for mental health promotion. Self-care includes a variety of practices, activities, hobbies, and relaxation exercises. On the one hand, self-care has the capacity to promote emotional endurance, but it also places the burden of recovery on patients. I aim to understand how self-care works for students. I will conduct interviews and observations with students and mental health counselors at 4 Canadian universities to investigate the benefits and drawbacks of self-care. I aim to understand and improve mental health care options for students while promoting the equality and well-being of our campuses.
So many interesting and creative GradFlix in this first year. Shortly, we will share a link in the chat box and you will be able to vote for the People's Choice Award. But first, we had a brief chat with Assistant Professor Katie Moisey recently. Katie shared some tips and strategies for our grad researchers.
Earlier, we learned from Wade that we need to find a way to stand out from the noise of so much available information. And that means we need to hone our communication skills. Katie, as a former science journalist and current researcher and teacher of science communications, can you tell us what you see as the biggest challenges for grad students when it comes to communicating with a broader community audience?
Sure. So I think as scientists, we have a certain way that we communicate. We use jargon for a reason. It allows us to be really precise, which is really important for us to do our jobs well. But when we're communicating with a broad audience, an audience of non-scientists, we need to really think about eliminating some of the barriers and making them feel really included in the conversation. So we need to get rid of jargon. We need to communicate the way we would in a conversation, which can be really, I think, hard for us to get used to. We're used to writing or speaking in sort of long, jargon-filled sentences, using passive voice, but it's not how we talk, and it feels stodgy and it feels academic. So one of the easiest things that we can do as scientists is communicate the way we would in a conversation, and that will help people to feel like they're part of a conversation. So that's one way. In terms of cutting through the noise, there is so much information out there. We have more access to information than ever before. That access doesn't mean the information is accessible. And so learning to speak in more accessible language is the first step. But we also need to think about how to engage people with science and with the process of science. And so I think there are lots of different ways to help people relate to science. Some types of science are sort of inherently relatable. We're all living through COVID right now. And so we are all connected to COVID science. We have a strong interest in following what's happening. But every type of science can be made relatable. We can relate to the people doing science. We can relate to the wonder of discovering something. And so I encourage students to figure out what makes your science relatable. Why do you do it? What is the most exciting thing that you get to do in a day? And think about communicating that to non-experts as a way to sort of invite them in, invite them to learn more about the science you do.
That's great advice. I really like that. Can you give us some practical tips that grad students can use when they're creating things like GradFlix or crafting other communication pieces that speak to their research?
Sure. So I think the first thing is you really want to hook someone. You want to invite them in right from the get-go. And so think about a way to open up your 1 minute talk that will get people in and get them interested in what you have to say. And maybe it's describing, something really surprising connected to your research, or maybe it's describing, giving them a visual of what you get to see down the microscope and describing this for them. After that, really focus on using conversational language, get rid of jargon, speak an active voice. Science is full of verbs and action. Cells can kill, cells can burst. We as scientists get to do incredible things. It's full of action. And so do your best to sort of capture that action using strong verbs. Talk in short, clear sentences. There's nothing basic about a short, clear sentence. They're strong. They can be really beautiful. And so include some short sentences in your talk, and then make sure that you're not using words that have a real sort of academic tone to them. Words like thus and therefore, and the types of things that we just don't say very often in conversation. Make sure you're getting rid of those, and that will help your talk to feel really conversational and really inviting.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Do you have any recommendations for online resources that may help grad students hone their skills?
So I don't have sort of a guide that I would suggest going to, but I do suggest following good science communicators on social media and watching them talk and reading their writing. There are great science journalists who are just expert at, making science relatable, describing processes in ways that really invite people in. And so seek out some of those examples and think about what it is that you love about them. Think and try to emulate that in your own communication. There are also, there are different forums for communication. So in GradFlix, you're kind of limited by time, but there are other platforms for communicating science that give you more time and more space to tell the full story of your research. And so I would look into opportunities to share your story and follow some professional science storytellers online. Look at things like Story Collider. It's just full of inspiration, and you will learn so much by listening to those talks as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Wade and Katie for taking time to speak with us. Now it's time to cast your vote for the People's Choice Award. We will post a link in the chat box right now.
What a great first year of submissions. We clearly have some very creative communicators in graduate studies here at McMaster University. It's never easy to be part of the initial set of any competition, and judging by the number of retakes I've had to take on my statement here, I imagine that you worked very hard to get to your submissions. I would like to thank our judges for their work on the preliminaries and the showcase, and who gave their time for this inaugural GradFlix competition. This could not have been an easy job with so many great videos submitted. Also, I'd like to thank Wade and Katie for speaking to the importance of effective communication. Finally, thanks to our GradFlix organizing team in the School of Graduate Studies, Kareem Moscato, Judy Pattison, Connie Caribs, and Catherine Maybray. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, our GradFlix winners for 2021. Third place goes to Rachael Finnerty from the Faculty of Science. Congratulations, Rachael. Second place goes to Erika Dao from the Faculty of Science. Congratulations to you as well, Erika. And finally, our top GradFlix submission for 2021 came from Kelvin Zoo in the Faculty of Engineering. Well done. You will forever be known as the inaugural GradFlix winners. Congratulations to Kelvin, Erika, and Rachael. To all the students who participated in this year's GradFlix, we hope to see you back next year in person. Our GradFlix team will tally the votes for the People's Choice Award and post the winner on the School of Graduate Studies website tomorrow morning. The link has been posted in the live chat. Thank you again for joining us for today's final showcase premiere.